And hello and welcome to MovieBoozer.com virtual pubcast. I'm your host, Ken Ekman, and joining me today is Bill Leon.
Hello.
And Bill Leon.
That's it.
That's it. And we have a bit of a... This will probably wind up being a little bit of a shorter episode today. But that said, we've got some movies to talk about. This weekend I saw... We'll just jump right into it. I saw Peter Jackson's documentary film, They Shall Not Grow Old. And first of all, Bill, do you know much about this film?
I might have saw you talk it up in the Facebook group, but wait, you saw this in a theater, or is this a streaming release?
It was in the theater. It's playing in theaters at the moment.
Okay.
So it originally had
a lot of documentaries. I don't know if I'm wrong here, but I feel like a lot of documentaries don't get to theaters anymore because of things like Netflix and Hulu and stuff like that.
Usually, what they'll do is they'll give those a very limited art house theatrical run. So if you live in a big city, you might have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then they go straight to streaming. This one's getting a little bit more of a push. It had a Fathom event that sold like gangbusters in December. And because of that, I think on the strength of that event, they gave this a run. It's actually made so far $12 million in the box office, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's a documentary that Peter Jackson undertook. He was asked by the British Imperial War Museum to see if he could make a film using the World War I footage they have in their archives. A lot of it is previously unseen, and a lot of it is I mean, of course, footage that you might have seen in various documentaries here and there over the years.
I don't remember where I heard about this, but yeah, there's like footage of actually people dying and getting killed and stuff.
Believe it or not, that's actually very minimal.
Okay.
The one thing about World War I footage is the camera was such a new thing, the film camera.
Mm-hmm.
Technology just didn't exist for them to film fast action. So you don't see a lot of actual combat footage. What you do get is footage of people doing, basically people in the trenches either doing work or messing around with each other, trying to kill time in between bombing raids.
Right.
And so what Peter Jackson decided is a lot of this footage is incredibly old and scratchy, and he decided to use his company's full power to restore the footage as well as he could. Not only restore it, but he also chose to colorize the footage. And he also gave it a 3D conversion, although I did not see the 3D version of it. My theater wasn't playing that.
Oh, okay.
I'm honestly not too big of a 3D conversion fan anyway, so I'm more interested in how well the footage was cleaned up. And I'm a person, before I speak about the movie itself, I should give a little background on my interest in this area of history. I'm a big history fan, but one of my biggest fascinations in history is the period of time from probably 1890 to roughly 1920. And the reason for that is because I believe that the events leading up to and then the aftermath of World War I really, more than any other major event in world history, caused all of the problems that we're suffering on this planet today. And I could go on a whole rant about about my theory on that, but let's just say that borders were drawn at the end of World War I that caused every war that's ever occurred after that.
Right.
Especially in the Middle East, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, They Shall Not Grow Old, though, is very specific. It focuses on the British military during World War I, and what Jackson decided to do is something that no other World War I documentary, to my knowledge, has ever attempted, which is to personalize the war. Because so much footage of the war only so much footage of the war is available because of how limited film cameras were at the time. Most documentaries about the war are very basic, historical, dealing with the facts of the war and the events that occurred. Jackson doesn't show any concern for the specifics of that. Instead, he chooses to focus on how people felt. And he does this by he found hours of recordings of British soldiers talking about their experiences of the war. That were most of these recordings were made in like the 1960s and 70s. And over 200 British veterans were interviewed.
Mhm.
And so he draws on these interviews and he intercuts the footage of these soldiers doing things as simple as having dinner or chatting with each other or huddling together, getting ready for the next big push, the next attack that they have to make in the trenches. And it's a very brilliant film because from a technical perspective, you're seeing this footage look cleaner than ever before. I have no problem with colorizing documentary footage, by the way, because the thing about documentary footage is people don't see the world in black and white, and they never have. So colorizing that does, from an artistic perspective, make that footage seem more real, and it allows you to connect to it better.
I'm not an anti-colorization person.
I'm against colorization when you're colorizing someone's movie against their will.
Oh, right.
Yeah, or rather than against their will necessarily, without having reached out to said filmmaker. And if you're going to colorize a movie, you want the filmmaker to actually give some input as to whether they want that to have been done to their movie.
Mm-hmm.
You can't colorize Casablanca because you do, and it's just not. It doesn't look like right. It wasn't meant to be viewed in that form. But anyway, so the footage is cleaner than you've ever seen footage from it. It's not perfect, but it looks so much more real. And that combined with the fact that most of these shots are shots of the faces of these people talking to each other. And what Jackson also did, and this is where we get a little bit artsy here, is anytime a character seems to be talking on camera, Jackson brought in lip readers to actually figure out what the people were saying to each other. And then he brought in actors to dub in voices.
Oh, okay.
Now, it's not like you hear long conversations. It's just like comments here and there while you're listening to the narration of these World War I veterans talking about their experiences. But it adds a little bit more realism. One of the kind of more fascinating scenes is there's this scene where a general is reading off a piece of paper, and they actually found the document that he was reading to his troops, and so they dubbed in a voice of someone reading over that, which is kind of neat. So from a technical perspective, this is a fascinating documentary. From a historical perspective, this is not a stuffy documentary where you're going to learn about when the Battle of the Somme took place. This is a documentary that is about bringing it personal. And so you hear these soldiers talk very earnestly about their experiences, like, what did they think of the girls in France? What did they think of the Germans when they were captured? What did they think about the food in the trench, which could sometimes be pretty disgusting?
Mm-hmm.
And how did they treat each other? Did they feel the war was worth fighting? Things like that. And now, when you mention dead bodies, yes, the film features plenty of images of them, because the truth is, what the people with cameras could film was the aftermath of battle. And you do see that, and it really this is very much an anti-war film. It hammers that home in a strong way, and rightfully so. I am pretty. I was left pretty wowed by this from both a artistic and historical exercise. I think this is one of the best documentaries I've seen this year. And anyway, that's I don't have too much more to say about it other than I do recommend it be seen.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's playing around here, but I will keep an eye out for it on streaming services and the like.
Hmm. I'll just reiterate the title again: "They Shall Not Grow Old."
Hmm.
And
Is there any kind of like meaning behind that title, poignancy to that title?
uh, I believe that's a quotation from somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hold on a sec. Oh, okay. The title is inspired. Oh, it's inspired by a line from a Lawrence Binyon poem. One of the things World War One is famous for is there were a lot of poets writing poems about the war,
Hmm.
and the line "They shall not grow old as we are." No, sorry, they shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. I guess was a line from a 1914 poem called "For the Fallen."
Oh, okay.
And anyway, that being said, and you know what? Another thing that is neat about this, and if you do get a copy of the film to watch, one thing I will say, Bill, is I hope it's presented the way it's presented in theaters, because what it begins with the way it's presented in theaters is before the movie begins, Peter Jackson comes on and gives a little bit of detail about the film.
Oh, okay.
And then after the movie's credits roll, he actually says, stay after the movie's credits roll, and I have a short documentary about the making of the film for you. So basically, there's like a half-hour documentary at the end after the credits roll where it shows, things like how he restored the footage, how music was recorded. He actually found an Australian band that plays a lot of old folk songs, and he brought them in to play.
Mhm.
And Peter Jackson, by the way, is a huge like World War One junkie. So there's a ton of you kind of get the nerd, a little bit of nerdiness out of it from him,
Mhm.
which is fun. Like, because there's this great line in the documentary segment of it, or well, in the making of documentary segment, where he's talking about how some of the sounds that they recorded were the sounds of actual World War II, or I'm sorry, World War One era cannons. And Peter Jackson puts it like this: "And I had a couple of cannons in storage, as you do." It's like, God damn it! Of course he would. I wouldn't be surprised if he has.
I mean, yeah, he's got that Lord of the Rings money. I'm
Yeah.
not surprised. Well, not only the Lord of the Rings money, the Hobbit money too, because as we all know, to get Peter Jackson to make the Hobbit, New Line Cinema definitely backed the money truck up to his doorstep.
Oh yeah, I mean he could probably buy New Zealand at this point.
Yeah. I own you, Flight of the Conchords.
Honestly, Flight of the Conchords made enough money they could probably buy, Wellington, New Zealand.
Yeah, well, I mean, not maybe. Well, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I'll say one more thing. The closing credits of the movie feature a song. It's an extended version of a World War One era song called "Mademoiselle from Armentières," which Jackson has stated is one of his favorite songs. And what's unique about this is Jackson brought in like British dudes who just happen to be in New Zealand working for the British government because he wanted the version of the song to feature actual British accents singing it. Now, what's unique about this song is it's a World War One era song that is specifically written from the perspective of a British soldier, and it's notorious because there's hundreds of different versions of the song, many of which are incredibly vulgar. And they recorded the version they record for the movie has a few lines that are sort of racy, but never going too over the top. But it got me looking into all the other versions of the song, and oh my god, people talk about how racy humor didn't start until 70s. That ain't true.
My Girl's Pussy, our movie boozer theme song.
Well, yeah, I guess.
That's from like 31.
Yeah, it is. But this is from, like 1915. Anyway, that said, we'll go ahead and move on to the next movie.
All right.
We're still talking about old-timey stuff, though. Stan and Ollie.
I have to relocate, so just I'll still be able to hear you, but I'm going to mute myself while I relocate.
All right, well, I'll get into the description. So, Stan and Ollie. This is a biopic that is about the famous comedy duo Laurel and Hardy, who were probably the biggest comedy act of the 1920s, 30s. And this film stars John C. Reilly as Stan Laurel, and I'm sorry, as Oliver Hardy, and Steve Coogan as Stan Laurel. And
Steve Coogan does an American accent?
Oh, no, Stan Laurel was British.
Oh, see, I don't even know these things. All right.
Yeah. So the movie it's an interesting biopic, and what's unique about it and what keeps it specifically different from other biopics is, rather than being like a career biopic, it focuses on their sad decline. And it's specifically on a tour. So in the early 1950s, Laurel and Hardy had gone for years without really having any kind of a movie going or any major work done. They, would tour the stage from time to time, and they embarked on a tour of the UK and Ireland. And at the time, Oliver Hardy was going through some serious health issues, and Stan Laurel was, not in the best of way himself. And this movie is just about presenting, the relationship between these two essentially co-workers, comedians who had worked together for so long, and finding out, what caused that decline. And yet the fact that they still had that fire in them, they even though they were in the worst of shape, they were still able to cobble together a tour that turned out to be quite successful in the end for them. So anyway, first of all, I want to say that Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly are flawless as Stan, Laurel, and Oliver Hardy. I grew up watching Laurel and Hardy shorts. If you have not seen a Laurel and Hardy short, they are almost all available on YouTube.
I think same with Abbott and Costello. It's outside of their film work, which I don't think Laurel and Hardy never made full-length movies, right?
They made longer form films, but they were still like 70 minutes long at most.
I think my frame of reference here would be like impressions of, like, how like Looney Tunes will do like a mouse version of Abbott and Costello.
Yes,
like shit like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite Looney Tunes is the Jack Benny parody one with was it Bugs Bunny? Is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So I know you're not familiar with the shorts, but here's what I'll say. I want you to look up some Laurel and Hardy stuff. I've got one for you: The Music Box.
These are the guys that John Cherry, Gaylord Sartain, they made a movie about him, right? With Bronson Pinchot?
Yeah, not very good.
Oh, okay. You've seen it. Okay.
I have.
I wasn't aware of it until they brought it up on Ernest Roulette.
Yeah, just don't watch that.
Go watch Ernest Roulette. Plug for Ernest Roulette.
Good.
But anyway.
For a show that's over. But
you can still watch it. It's still out there.
That's true. And speaking of what's still out there, Bill, I want you to write this down. I want you to devote a half hour. Just go to YouTube or wherever and find The Music Box.
The Music Box. Okay.
It's a Laurel and Hardy short. It actually, I believe, was like an Academy Award winning short.
Okay.
And it's a perfect digest. It's a perfect, easily digestible view of their completely goofy antics, which combined. What was great with Laurel and Hardy is it combined physical comedy with very clever quips that just like happen so quick you could miss them. And the overwhelming element of Laurel and Hardy as a character act is Oliver Hardy, the big guy in the of the two, is sort of a smarmy, smug character who is sort of the, I guess, ersatz leader of the two, and he always thinks that he knows better. Stan Laurel is a slightly dim but always game cohort of his.
Mm-hmm.
And in most of their comedy acts, they're doing some random job and utterly failing at it in every possible way. And the music box, I'll just say, describe that short really quick and without going into spoiler territory, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
for spoiler territory for a damn near 90-year-old movie. So the music box, the entire half-hour short is them trying to get a piano upstairs and deliver it to a person who purchased it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of their comedy comes from milking how completely and utterly they fail at it. It's really quite funny. Anyway, so Stan and Ollie, the movie, what this film does so well is it captures the sensibilities the two have with each other and how they were able to perform. And it shows them that they always were sort of on. Like, as soon as they knew that there was an audience, even if it was just kids watching them, they would go into their mannerisms, and they were quite good at it.
They were in an Our Gang short. Yes. I don't remember which one, but they were definitely in an Our Gang short.
They may very well have been. They cameoed in a lot of stuff, actually.
Mm-hmm. I didn't mean to cut you off. That just like popped into my mind.
So where the movie Stan and Ollie is set, though, is during this tour where basically they're trying hard to tour in order to get funding to make a new movie. They had a plan to do a comedic adaptation of Robin Hood. Unfortunately, they really didn't have good publicity push, and the movie was quickly abandoned. And so it's them on tour trying to make the best of a terrible situation. I do, though, want to say one thing that boosts this movie even more, besides how incredibly perfect Coogan and Riley nail the Laurel and Hardy characters, is the about halfway through the film, their spouses come into it. And both Laurel and Hardy were married to some very unique people. Lucille Hardy, played by Shirley Henderson in this movie, and Ida Laurel, played by Nina Arianda, I think is her name.
Mm-hmm.
They are almost a comedy duo in themselves because basically Laurel's wife, Ida, is this Russian immigrant who is very self-important, and she clearly loves him, absolutely, but does not allow anyone to give even the slightest slight to him. And on the other hand, you have Lucille Hardy, who is sort of a put-upon wife who it fears so much for her husband's health, but at the same time is a sarcastic bitch. And you watch as these two women just barb at each other because their husbands, have a great working relationship with each other, but they don't have the best working relationship as spouses. And one thing I like is the movie doesn't go for that huge arc of breakup. There is a moment in the film where the two have a fight, but it's so quickly diluted by events that occur that it doesn't feel like forced drama. Ultimately, what this movie is a damn great venue to watch Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly at their best. And Reilly absolutely disappears into Oliver Hardy. The makeup job is amazing.
Okay.
And what's fascinating, though, is this is Laurel and Hardy at their lowest. And the fact that they're able to be so funny, even when they're not in the best frame, is a great reflection on them as a comedy team. All right, so I've talked for a long time. Why don't we go ahead and move on to Bill Leon's movie to present this week?
Now, I had heard about this. So I've always kind of had a fondness for Scooby-Doo. I don't know, when I was a kid, like especially when Cartoon Network first got started in the early 90s, like it was because Ted Turner had acquired the Hanna-Barbera library. So before Cartoon Network started producing their own original content, they would just show that stuff over and over and over again. Looney Tunes, Hanna-Barbera stuff, maybe some Filmation type of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but with all the different incarnations of Scooby-Doo over the years, they would just, show all of that. And there was this one series called The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, which I was actually surprised to learn that you were familiar with. It makes sense. I just, you always say, like, as a kid, you kind of got bored with cartoons at an early age.
Well, that's the thing. I got bored with cartoons, but that doesn't mean I didn't watch, all of those old classics. Like the older cartoons, I watched all the time. It was new stuff that the problem I think I had is that a lot of the newer cartoons felt like pandering to me.
I mean, yeah, it depends on the show, but yeah, I mean, like,
I didn't even know that was a word at the time, but it felt wrong. It felt like they're trying too hard to appeal to younger kids and being cool, which is interesting.
Yes, great segue into the not only Scrappy-Doo, which I have some stuff to say about Scrappy-Doo, but we'll get to that. Scrappy-Doo was part of the 13 Ghosts series, and this new little Filipino boy named Flim Flam. Oh boy, Flim Flam. He is just annoying as shit.
Yeah, it's very much poochy.
I rewatched some episodes of 13 Ghosts in preparation for the new movie, and because I declared that I was going to review it for this show. And yeah, it's
rough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Like it's obnoxious. Like let me just put that out on Front Street. It's obnoxious, but I appreciate the idea of doing like a long form serialized story with Scooby-Doo, which is something that they would perfect years and years and years later.
It was their attempt, yeah.
Yeah. The show Mystery Incorporated, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated from 2010. If you've never seen that show, it is probably the best Scooby-Doo product that is out there to this day. And it tells a very it's case by case. It's a Monster of the Week type of Scooby-Doo thing, but there is an ongoing story that permeates the 2 seasons, and it has a wonderful payoff. Patrick Warburton and Lewis Black are regulars on the show. I can't praise it enough. It's great, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. And almost 30 years later, they have finally, the show was canceled before they caught the 13th Ghost. They did this direct-to-video movie just came out this week called Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13th Ghost. And I watched it, and we're going to talk about it. But first, in regards to Flim Flam, and I know Nathan Rabin said he didn't quote this, the Poochie effect. You went right to Flim Flam when I brought this up.
Oh yeah, well that's the thing. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, to anyone as a kid who watched it, immediately the thing they remember is, oh, so that was when they introduced that kid character who was even more annoying than Scrappy-Doo?
I don't remember Flim Flam from the show as a kid. The thing I remember as a kid from it was thinking, where's Velma and Fred?
Yeah, that's another thing that they leave out, which is strange.
It's explained in this movie. The explanation is that they were both off at summer camp. And that's the thing, is a lot of their little explanations for stuff and continuity errors are literally like jokes. So Flim Flam is in this movie. he has aged. The gang is still supposed to be teenagers, and he looks to be about the same age as them. And I can't even remember what the throwaway line is that he had a growth spurt. It's dumb.
So perhaps we should discuss a little bit more about why Flim Flam is such an awful character.
He was that hotshot, fast-talking kid. The way they present his character in the original incarnation of the show was that he was a trickster. Not a trickster, but
con artist.
Con artist, yes.
He's the too cool for school character who's always getting one on over people, and he's a compulsive liar. And throughout the entire series, as a kid, I remember my thought being, why are they letting this kid come with them on any of these adventures? He is annoying. He's not useful. He in fact lies his ass off all the time, getting himself into and out of trouble.
I guess that was supposed to be
of everyone else.
Like that was supposed to be cute, I guess.
And when the heck is Fred gonna just go back to his frat?
His frat?
Of course he's a frat member. Look at that ass, Scott.
In this, so in the new movie, Fred, the summer camp he went to was cheerleading camp. So apparently in this movie, they make a few different jokes about Fred being a male cheerleader. I'll be honest, like some of the jokes in this are really good, and some of them are not.
Actually, there is something to that, in that it's actually very common for like Ivy League level fraternity people to be cheerleaders. George W. Bush was a cheerleader, for instance.
I watched the movie W in theaters and I fell asleep. I don't remember if that was in there or not.
Yeah, well, he was. So that's just an example.
So, the movie opens with the backstory of Vincent Van Gogh and the Chest of Demons from the 13 Ghosts series. And Vincent Van Gogh, who obviously is no longer voiced by Vincent Price because he's dead, is replaced by Maurice LaMarche, which also had me thinking, how many Hollywood legends has Maurice LaMarche either voiced or replaced? Because he was also Orson Welles in Ed Wood, and obviously the Brain from Pinky and the Brain is an obvious Orson Welles impression. What Hollywood legend can this guy not do?
That's a very good question. He has done a lot of them.
Yeah, he's I hesitate to say great, but he did the best job he could do. He's got a hell of a Vincent Price impression. Vincent Price and his partner Mortifer, with an F, not Mortimer, but Mortifer, which is so silly of a name. They're trying to protect the chest of demons, and Vincent Van Gogh runs off with it. And then, the events of Scooby-Doo and the 13th Ghost takes place. Cut to modern day, to where I think the two of the best jokes in the movie are: the gang is chasing this dude through a mall, and they're trying to catch him because I guess they think he's a ghost or a fake ghost or whatever. And they get to the escalator, and Fred stops everybody, and he's like, whoa, we can't run up the escalator. Hard cut to them slowly riding the escalator to the top. That got a laugh out of me. And then the other joke that I thought was pretty good was they catch the guy, and they're trying to pull his mask off, but it's just his real face. And it turns out they were chasing the wrong person. And the cop comes out, and he's like, "This man is innocent. He could press charges and you could go to jail." Which is such like a blunt, like I was really hoping for more humor like that as it went on. And it doesn't match. Like that opening scene to me had, like I said, the two best jokes in the movie. Because I love it. I love it when they can take Scooby-Doo and stay faithful, but also poke fun at the ridiculousn's of it.
Right.
It's a fine line to ride. And, anyway, so Vincent Van Gogh, they have to sell the mystery machine and quit being mystery solvers because the police told them to. And they find the old crystal ball that Vincent Van Gogh used to contact them through. And he's, all of a sudden he pops up and he's like, "I've been trying to get a hold of you for months. I found the 13th ghost." Fred and Velma are both like, "What the hell is he? What is this? What are you talking about? You never told us about this." Which also leads me to believe that I think this movie only really considers the original Scooby-Doo Where Are You and the 13th Ghost series as canon.
So is Scrappy Doo in this or not?
Here's the thing about that. So when Flim Flam is he meets up with Fred and Velma first. He doesn't know that they're connected to the characters that he's already met. So when all of a sudden everybody comes together in the third act, Flim Flam says, where's Scrappy Doo? And Velma says, what's a Scrappy Doo? And then that's it. They don't bring him up again. And I'm like, that's such a cheap cop-out, because I get it, but at the same time, like this whole, for the past decade or even more than that, going back to the James Gunn penned live action Scooby-Doo, like Scrappy Doo is this punching bag.
Yeah.
And I get
Flim
why.
Flam is so much worse.
Well, no, that's true, but I get why Scrappy Doo is a punching bag. I just feel like one of these writers should see it as a challenge. Like, how can we reintroduce Scrappy Doo and make him better? It's the same thing with I think, honestly, and you're gonna think I'm crazy, maybe you won't. I think the Star Wars writers could do the same thing with Jar Jar Binks. Find a way to make it work. Obviously, with Scrappy Doo, I mean, he's got the catchphrases and shit, puppy power and all that. It's probably more of a challenge, but just shitting on him all the time it's old at this point. It's been done to death.
You're hearing it here. Scrappy Doo is less annoying than Jar Jar Binks.
I'd put him on the same level. I think I'd put him on the same level. I enjoyed this movie, but I would not recommend it to somebody, really anybody, because it really loses steam as it goes. Like, it starts out really strong, but then my real problem is the ending. I did not like the ending to this. The quote unquote 13th ghost is a guy in a mask. It's his Vincent Van Gogh's original partner, Mortifer, that I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And then the 13, like, then they just like kind of get lazy and wrap shit up really quickly. Like the ghost just like pops up, and it was rushed. It's a rushed ending. I had, I hesitate to say I kind of expected more from this. I was really hoping for like something really cool, but maybe I'm kind of spoiled by watching Mystery Incorporated a few months ago. I binged it in October for Halloween. And the writing there is just clever throughout, and really goes out of its way to try to make Scooby-Doo into something that feels more important, and like there's larger story going on. A lot of people compare the Mystery Incorporated series to Twin Peaks in terms of like there's this town they live in, and all the people in the town seem to be aware of some shit that happened years ago that the kids don't know, and they have to unravel this mystery. Mm-hmm. I guess that series kind of spoiled me. The first like 5-10 minutes of this are really funny, but it starts to lose steam pretty quickly.
That's
I would really be interested to see a writer take on the task of I don't know about reshaping, but like doing something with Scrappy Doo. You know what I mean? Like it can't be easy, and I believe me, I have no idea how I would do it, but I either that or just stop shitting on him all the time. Just like let it go. It's a cheap joke. It's been done to death. I'm sick of seeing it.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and move on to our next film. So the final film we're going to talk about tonight is a movie that took me by surprise, because I really enjoyed Joe Cornish's his debut film, Attack the Block, which was also a film focused on young people, but in that case, it was sort of a very interesting urban British look at sort of kind of a gang of kind of crappy little kids who were like, all of them were gang members who were really kind of mean, and then suddenly aliens invade and they become heroes.
I will say this: he's about to review The Kid Who Would Be King. Yeah, I almost called it A Kid in King Arthur's Court.
Different movie.
Different movie. I think between the January release date and the marketing, because the trailers for this have not been great.
No, I was turned off by the marketing of this movie to the point where I honestly was about ready to just not see it because it really made the movie look like it was going to be just not a very good movie. I don't know. It's hard to.
And I can't blame. I mean, I didn't go see it because the only trailers I would see were on YouTube, and they didn't look good. The marketing, whoever cut these trailers together, didn't do a good job. If the movie is as good as I've heard it is, which
it is. This is honestly in terms of movies that are about a group of kids getting involved in something supernatural and it being sort of a combination between young coming of age comedy and adventure film. This is right up there with the best. I mean, honestly, I've never been a huge Goonies fan, but the Goonies formula is an easy go-to for this sort of concept, which is a group of teenagers / preteens doing their thing.
I think they were very wise not to put King Arthur anywhere in the title of this because, as I'm sure you know, King Arthur is just box office poison.
Clearly, the word king is at this point.
Yeah. Did this movie bomb?
Oh, this movie is bombing hard.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
International box office, it's brought in $18 million. Budget was $60 million. So that's not good.
That's not good.
No, unfortunate. So the movie is, it just to basically give a brief overview, the main character, Alex, is this 12-year-old boy who is sort of going through a tough time. He's being bullied by older students at this not boarding school, a private school that he attends. And he gets into a fight, and he's the one who gets in trouble instead of the bully. And one day, while he's being chased by a bully, he kind of falls into this construction site, and in the middle of this this destroyed construction site, where there's been some demolition, he sees a sword buried in the concrete, and he pulls it out of the stone. Classic King Arthur stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that triggers a very unusual event in that I'm sorry, I'm falling over my words here.
A wizard, a dragon. I don't know. I'm on the edge of my seat here.
A new student appears at school, and this new student introduces his name. He goes by, I think he decides that he's going to be called like Merton or something. He gives himself a really obviously bad made up name.
It's Merlin. I get it.
He basically doesn't even attempt to hide the wizard aspect of it. And the actor Angus Imrie, who plays him, by the way, this is one of the most fun performances I've seen of the year. He nails just this weird physicality of this guy who is like, basically, he's an old man trapped in the body of this teen kid. And when I say old man, Patrick Stewart portrays him in a few scenes where he reverts to his old form.
I've seen the transformation effect in the trailer, and I was impressed by that.
Yeah, it's quite good, and that only is the one scene. Most of the time, it's just cut away, and then he's there.
Oh, okay.
But budget, got to save money somewhere.
Hey, $60 million. Come on.
But honestly, Patrick Stewart, it's fine and good to see him. I'm more interested in this actor, Angus Imrie.
I've heard, people are really praising his work in this.
He in every way embodies like the wizened old wizard, but also the kookiness of that. If you were a fan of the Sword in the Stone, the Disney Sword in the Stone, and the goofiness of Merlin in that, imagine that as like a teenage boy and someone who's just completely off his rocker in a lot of ways, but also right. Like he knows what he's doing. He's just kind of crazy. And there's this uh, there's this great like physical gesture he does when he's doing his magic that is, you know, like him snapping his fingers and clapping his hands together that seems so innocuous, but he sells it on you so well. I had so much fun with this. Another thing that's really cool is the villain of this movie is your classic King Arthur villain, Morgan Le Fay, who was King Arthur's like half sister. And the art design that goes into this, the concept is that Morgan Le Fay was years ago cast into the, you know, the darkness of Earth, and she has spent those years basically slowly keeping herself preserved by like integrating herself into like the roots of the underground. So she's got all of these plant roots growing into her. It's really goofy and but also creepy because there's some like body horror because there's like roots growing into her body, and she uses those roots to sort of like spy on people because the roots go all over the world, and it's really weird how I loved the makeup design and the special effects that go into it.
Would that imagery be too much for younger children, do you think?
I would say this is not a movie to take a kid younger than, say, 8 or 9. But from 8 and up, I think they would appreciate the movie, unless there's someone who scares really easy. But because the one thing is, the kids contend with a lot of so what Morgan Le Fay is able to conjure until she's able to awaken. Basically, what happens is, it turns out there's a solar eclipse happening in 4 days, and so they have 4 days before she has her full power and she can actually return to the world of the living. In the meantime, she's able to conjure, basically to possess the souls of the dead, and so there's a lot of zombie knights who start attacking, and what makes them even creepier is they're like on fire, so burning zombie knights.
Do they play Neon Knights by Black Sabbath?
They should. That's an
yeah,
awesome
they
song.
should have.
I am a Dio Sabbath fan. I
know. Don't get me wrong. That stuff is great, but I like the Ozzy stuff more. Honestly, I mean, maybe not more, but equally. Like they're both fucking fantastic.
It's fine. I just happen to prefer Dio.
I like that more garagey kind of scrappiness that the earlier Ozzy stuff has to it. That, you know, that quality of like, these guys are these young guys. They're trying to shock the world, essentially.
So I will say this: my favorite Sabbath album with Ozzy is actually the very first one, Black Sabbath.
That is a good one. It has NIB. It has, well, that whole medley of songs, whatever it's called, like Fall Asleep and all that. Like, that's fantastic.
The song Black Sabbath is amazing.
Wicked World is one of my favorites just because it's so weird to have like an upbeat, sort of jazzy Black Sabbath song.
The Wizard, which is the only blues song they ever did.
Yes, yeah, that's
a great album, and I do dig that. And you're right. That's, you know, the garagey aspect. I get it, but there's something about Dio is a true believer in metal.
Well, the thing,
there's something about it that I think is so much more powerful to me.
Yeah, well, with the Dio era, you had the band members outside of Ozzy. You know, they had spent almost a decade
getting better,
and then Dio was playing with Rainbow before that, so he was. It wasn't
more than that. Dio was actually in bands in the 50s, so he'd been around for a long time.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like by 79 or 80, whenever Dio actually joined Black Sabbath, like they were all staunch professionals at that point.
And Dio brought some, you know, his uniquely fantastical songwriting, which was, you know, maybe not as seedy as it was during the Ozzy era, but what he lacked in sleaze, he made up for in fantasy elements, bringing in stuff like dragons and stuff, which to me is that's an aspect of metal I enjoy more. I like the fantasy metal stuff.
Is this an episode of Kiss and Tell?
It should be. So anyway, the kid who would be king. Another thing that's great in it is the basically the entire children's cast. So Alex's best friend named Betters is played by Dean Chuamu, I think. He's
who's that? I don't know if I've ever seen him in anything. I don't know the name.
You haven't, because this is the only movie he's ever appeared in.
Oh.
He kind of reminds me of the kid from Hunt for the Wilder.
Oh, he's a child actor. Okay.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of the kid from Hunt for the Wilder People.
Mm-hmm.
But a really great performance as sort of the weakling sidekick who is, he's all heart, but not really there strength-wise, and a bit of a coward.
Mm-hmm.
Provides some great comic relief. And there's one thing that I enjoyed about the movie is very early on it dispatches with the thing that I was worried the most about, which was the way the trailers are cut, it makes you think that the villain of the movie is going to be like the bullies who are beating him up.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that they actually go with the actual Arthurian legend, which is in the actual Arthurian legend, King Arthur united with people who once considered him, a threat. So his enemies, so to speak. And so he actually ends up, the two bullies who beating him up early on, after a few trials and tribulations, become allies of his. And that's really fascinating. So
I don't know how it's presented in the film, but especially in the 90s with kids movies, you usually had that, like Mighty Ducks, the villain joins the team. Jack Frost, he becomes friends with the villain because he lost his dad too.
This is more believable because they actually have a period of distrust that develops that is and it naturally comes together. There's some heart to this movie because there's a plot involving Alex. Of course, as these movies are, the main character has a father who's missing.
Mm-hmm.
That's, even ever since E.T., that's the way these movies have been. Father's never in the picture. And really, just this is a very funny, heartfelt movie. With great performances, very good special effects considering the budget, and I was impressed. I would rewatch this movie if it's on TV. I'll throw it on. Joe Cornish, you keep making movies, even though you've probably got some debts to pay after this.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Like, if this goes on to Netflix and a lot of people watch it on Netflix, maybe Netflix will hire him to make something. You never know. You never know.
Yeah, this movie definitely would have been a great Netflix debut release because it's a movie that is going to be a cult film.
Oh, okay.
The cult is going to develop almost instantly because it's a movie, family can show their kids without it being too bad, but also it has enough brains to it that you'll find it entertaining as well. And it's a supremely British movie. And the one thing I've learned about streaming is British shit is loved by streamers. There's so many British shows that are amazingly popular in America through Netflix and Amazon. My parents are definitely amongst them. We actually I actually got a subscription to a channel that has a bunch of other British shows because they exhausted what Netflix had to offer.
Have they watched, or have you watched Man Down?
They mostly watch mysteries. Is Man Down?
Yeah, it's a comedy. It's
okay.
A farcical comedy show.
I have seen an Australian series called Rake that is pretty hilarious.
Okay.
But no, what's Man Down about?
It's about this guy. It's kind of a slice of life type of thing, but it's silly. The main actor. Here's what's funny is I was watching it with a friend, and the main actor reminded me of Rick Mayall. And I was like, oh, this guy reminds me of Rick Mayall. Cut to a few scenes later, Rick Mayall comes in and he plays his dad.
No. Well, that's good.
One of actually probably his last performance because he died. Like the show ran for like 4 seasons and he's only in the first one. He died after the first one. But I haven't finished it yet, but I enjoyed what I saw of it. I'm kind of iffy with Britcoms.
Well, I mean, with sitcoms of all kinds, there's hit and miss elements.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will say that the one thing about British TV that makes it, of course, this movie isn't TV, but still, the one thing about British TV that I think makes it superior in a lot of ways to American TV is because there's no guarantee of being renewed for a new season. There's a lot of pressure for you to try to resolve a lot of your conflict by the end of the season.
Right.
And so there's very rarely do you have instances where a show will be canceled and there's no resolution to the problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think a huge improvement because in the US there's so much pressure for a show to be, to have 100 episodes so it can be syndicated.
Mm-hmm. Which is why it's kind of refreshing when you see a show like I'm failing to think of it, but like Gravity Falls, you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Everybody wants season 3 of Gravity Falls, and Alex Hirsch is just like, no, I did what
done.
I wanted to do. Yes,
yeah.
I like that. That's fine with me. Things do not need to go on forever.
And that's what John Cleese said with Faulty Towers.
That was only 2 seasons.
12 episodes of that show exist.
And the young ones too is only 12. And they probably could have done more, but we did what we wanted to do with it.
And yet who hasn't heard of those shows? I mean, they're both
Mm-hmm.
comedy legends.
Yes.
So, that's what you don't have to have a show that goes on forever.
Now, on the flip side of that conversation, I do want to point out the fact that I'm so surprised to be sitting here saying this to you. It's always Sunny in Philadelphia is still good. They're they've done 13 seasons and it's still good. That's insane.
I mean, I stopped watching the show about 10 years ago.
Right.
But that's not to say I don't like it. It's just I have other things to do.
You're not a TV guy either.
Not really.
Yeah.
But when I have seen an episode here and there,
mm-hmm.
I always find it enjoyable.
Within the past, like just 5-6 years, it's been like there's a handful of really great episodes and a few duds, and they've been consistent with that formula.
Handful of great ones and a few duds.
Yeah, less duds than great ones, but I'm saying the fact that they can still make me laugh out loud 13 years on the air, and they're under contract to do one more 14 seasons. I don't know if FX is going to renew the contract or whatever, but that's impressive, man. Seinfeld only ran for 9 seasons.
Yeah, and Seinfeld could have gone longer, but Jerry actually decided to end it, despite an offer of $5 million an episode.
Wow,
which is I mean,
I'm reminded
how much richer could you get?
I'm reminded of that great Dave Chappelle joke that he told in his stand-up from last year or whatever it was. He said, I could walk away from $5 million. You couldn't walk away from Louis' freckled dick.
Oh God. Well, it wasn't so much walking away that was the problem, but yeah, I get it.
You can walk away. From what I've heard from other comedians, like Sarah Silverman apparently said that Louis C.K. would just pull his dick out and she would laugh about it.
Right. I think that's the problem, is just the assumption that someone wants to see that. I'm pretty sure that's what got him in trouble to begin with. I don't even think there's that many allegations of improper,
he wasn't forcing himself. He just pulled his dick out.
Which itself, let me put it this way.
That's not cool. That's not cool.
No, that's not at all. And his response to the whole thing has been kind of not cool. So.
Oh, I haven't paid attention to that. What did he do?
Oh, nothing. He's pretty much just kind of not
Deflecting.
talked about. Yeah, deflecting.
Oh, okay.
It's not as not cool as say Kevin Spacey, which is flat out denying and then doing that creepy video.
That was so weird. That Frank Underwood video. What the fuck was that?
To me, that honestly, that video is it's sort of like when O.J. Simpson put out the book If I Did It.
Oh my god, yes.
Where he's just totally confessing without confessing.
Oh, I forgot that book was a thing. I remember when that came out. I was in high school.
It never actually, yeah. What I found funny is that the publisher decided not to publish it, and then they decide to publish it, but put all the money that it made, give it to like the Goldman family, something like that, which is,
yeah.
What a positive note to end the podcast on.
What a world we live in.
What a world. What a world. I'm melting.
That's my go-to drunk movie now.
Is it?
Wizard of Oz. Yeah. If I'm really drunk and I want to watch a movie, I'll put that
on. Here's my guess. My guess is the first part of the movie, the black and white part of the movie, is where you're still buzzing, and then by the time the World of Oz comes, that's when the hangover comes in, and you're like, oh god,
no,
sensory overload.
I just have fun with it. I love that movie.
I
wonder if people still show it to their kids.
I hope so.
I do too. Yeah. I you know what? I've always heard stories that like the production was a disaster. I would love to see like a documentary or a YouTube video essay that like compiles all those stories together.
Oh yeah, I mean,
like I know Margaret Hamilton got burned on like pretty badly on the set.
I think the most telling thing about the Wizard of Oz, something that a lot of people don't realize about the Wizard of Oz, is that there were about 5 different directors who worked on that movie.
And only one credited.
Yeah, Victor Fleming, even though he maybe directed part of it. Because there was Richard Thorpe, there was Richard Thorpe, there was who else? King Vidor, Victor Fleming, George Cukor, and I'm just pulling up a list here.
It's amazing that it turned out as good as it did.
Yes. Yeah, just... well, that, and also, apparently, like, the little people actors who played the Munchkins were just constantly drunk. Apparently, they were just a terror on the set. Like, they would play
Tiny Town.
They would play pranks on people and just crazy stuff.
Oh, I would love to see behind-the-scenes footage of that stuff.
There was a movie with Chevy Chase.
About the making of The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah. What is that called?
Chevy Chase.
Yeah. It's a weird one. I haven't seen the whole thing. It's just called Under the Rainbow from 1981. But it's got Billy Barty.
I'm going to have to look this up.
Yeah, it's got Carrie Fisher, Chevy Chase, Eve Arden, and Billy Barty. And it's basically based loosely on the fact that the hotel that the little people were in just were, it was on a tear. The movie actually got a Razzie. It's a terrible movie, apparently.
Oh, okay.
So it's notorious.
That's not a good sign, but okay.
Yeah.
But then again, the Raspberry Awards, the guy that created the Raspberry Awards, I don't know if I trust his judgment like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not the judge of them all. But the truth is, the truth is the movie is Under the Rainbow is one of those cult movies because it's just weird. Oh, Mako's in it.
Oh, okay.
Hey, it's always good to see Mako somewhere.
Yeah. You still need to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender at some point. There's no rush, but that's a great series.
Oh, for a second I thought you were talking about the movie The Last Airbender, and I was like...
I am not talking about that terrible film. Bender, watch the cartoon, because the cartoon is like the way people talk about Harry Potter and how it was like, oh man, you know, I grew up with those characters, I watched them grow and develop and yada yada yada. That's how I felt about Avatar: The Last Airbender.
All
Like
right.
it's better than Harry Potter.
Avatar: The
Controversial
Last
statement.
Airbender. It's better than Harry Potter.
It is better than Harry Potter. And
So-
Mako's in the first 2 seasons. That's why I brought it up.
So this coming week, I unfortunately have to see and review What Men Want.
That's a sequel to What Women Want?
It is, believe it or not. I don't even know if it's official or not, but it's the same title, and the concept is exactly the same.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, though. Wasn't there a comedy sketch about this?
Yes.
Yeah, this has been done.
But it's Taraji P. Henson and Tracy Morgan in this movie.
Oh, my mom was watching like Entertainment Tonight earlier, and they were on there. Okay, that must have been what they were promoting.
So here's the reason why I got it to review, because Zach knows that I actually did see What Women Want in theaters.
I did not see it in theaters, but I was too young. My mother loves that movie, though, and
it has its moments, I will admit. But it's not a good movie.
It's less fun when you think like he can hear what women want, but all he's thinking is racist thoughts.
Oh wow, yeah, that's probably the irony, of course, being that this movie is a very, very diverse cast. What Men Want, and yeah, so I'm not looking forward to this because the concept, first of all, if they actually made a movie that said What Men Want, it would be NC-17 rated.
Yes, filthy. Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like they're not going to go all out with this. Is this rated PG-13?
Probably.
Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. No.
I'm looking that up because that's if the movie
it would be disgusting.
Yeah. It is rated R.
Oh, okay. Well,
Hey.
not even just sexual stuff, just like, you know,
other things.
Oh, my asshole itches or whatever. Like,
yeah, just talking about like,
you know, did I put on deodorant before I left the house?
No. Okay. Well, I'll just use some Febreze on my clothes.
Yeah, there you go.
Just stuff like that. Well, if the movie surprises and is actually funny, that'll be great, because I think Taraji P. Henson is a good actress. I just think that she's gotten so many terrible roles.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so that'll be an interesting discussion. Anyway, with that said, we'll go ahead and bring close to this episode. So, see you next week.
For what men want, I guess.